So I'm asking you a question. You always fasted Yom Kippur, right? Okay. Do you think next year you'll fast Yom Kippur?
Yes.
Lo Yaver. We have a Lo Yaver over here, right? You know?
Right.
How do you know? How do you know it's next year? And can you tell me that 1,000,000% that you're going to fast? No, you can't. You have a Chiddush.
Right.
But right now, Reb Shmuel Wagner, right? When it comes to that, is Lo Yaver Lo Yaver. How many other areas in your life are there that are Lo Yaver Lo Yaver? Now, what if I want to start adding areas? That's a Benoni area, and that's real. And that's something which is real. I've been in about 5 minutes, boom. It wasn't me, it was behavior.
Behavioral.
And Tanya is about me. It's about transformation.
Mm-hmm. You know when you're at a good Teichendike Farbringen and you wish it was being recorded? Welcome to Spreading the Springs, Conversations in Chassidus, a podcast for Farbringen where we have real conversations about real Chassidus. Okay, welcome. We have in front of us Tanya. And we have with us Rabbi Naftali Silberberg from Let's Talk Tanya fame. And the first thing I'm curious about is what got you into Tanya specifically. So however much of your background and your history as a mashpia in general you want to go into and what would be relevant, but specifically let's go straight to how it related to you teaching Tanya.
So, I've told the story before, but back when I was a bacher, Tanya wasn't as popular as it is today. Baruch Hashem, today you see a renewed chayas in Tanya, and all segments of society within Lubavitch, and Baruch Hashem also within those communities that don't yet identify themselves as Lubavitch. But when I was a bacher learning Tanya was a strange thing. But why aren't you learning Samach Vav? Like, what did you lose in Tanya? But when I was around 18 years old, so I was learning that year in Kfar Chabad, and I decided I want to learn Tanya. There's a certain bacher there, a bacher shliach, who had a kach in Tanya, had Reb Yoel's tapes on Tanya typed up, like mimeograph, like typed up. I remember I borrowed them, and I started learning Tanya, and it interested me. But l'chira, if it would have been just that, okay, so it would have been a passing fad as a bacher in Tanya. I enjoyed Tanya. But then I started teaching Tanya. So first I taught in Mesivta in Vetera. This is in the late 1990s. And it grew on me. And then I just started teaching Tanya different places. I had this year in Flatbush that I started teaching. I don't even remember, a bunch of different places. And the one thing I found is that there is no better way to learn Tanya than to teach Tanya. And when you teach, it really forces you to look at it and try to understand it in a different way. And like I said, there's this year that I had in Flatbush for many years, every Thursday night teaching Tanya. And in that year, I actually finished the entire Tanya. There are probably parts of Kunter Sachin and maybe Ger Sakodesh that till today I probably would not have learned well, if not for the fact that I had to teach them. And so rewarding that I did teach them and I learned them. And over the years, so the more I taught, the more I learned, the more I got into it, and it just kind of became part of my identity to a certain extent.
Right. And let's skip ahead to Let's Talk Tanya. So then, how did that happen? Like, was it your idea, someone else's idea?
It was my idea, but my idea was a very simple idea, which is that I've been teaching Tanya. I have a lot of different Tanya students. So for many years, I'm like, okay, so I should just make a voice note every single day and make a WhatsApp group and send to my students a short thought on the Tanya of the day. That was the thought. And I kept on pushing it off. This is this thought that came to me probably like, I don't know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So I pushed it off for two reasons. The second reason why I pushed it off was because I wanted to wait till I actually finished teaching the entire Tanya. So I had like a grasp of the entire Tanya. The first reason was I was lazy. So, and then
Park Aleph. It's right there in Park Aleph.
Perek Aleph, Perek Chavav. And then I decided, and I got a little push from someone, you just have to do it. You just have to do it. So I actually started Let's Talk Tanya before I'd finished the entire Tanya. I mentioned it before about the hardest prakim of Tanya, what's approaching actually right now in Chitas, is the first prakim of Kunter Sachen. I had not yet taught them, and I thought that by the time I get there, I would have already taught them, but I didn't. So actually, the first prakim of Kunter Sachen, I had to learn for Let's Talk Tanya before I ever taught them inside. So I decided, okay, so I'm going to I'll do a voice note every single day. And then someone said, or I thought, I'm like, okay, I know there's certain people who like to do, who like video. So I figured, if that's the mitzvah, that some people like video, then it's silly to do it in a voice note and afterwards find out that people want video and then you have to redo it again. We'll do it in video. Okay, so I knew someone, a bacher over here, and I asked him if he can come and take some videos. So I did a few videos. And he sent them to me, and I was horrified. It was so professional, and it was not what I was looking for. You have to realize I'm coming from a place where I'm sending a voice note to 70 people every single day, and suddenly professional video. I'm like, no, we're not doing this. Forget about it. And but I showed it to some people, and they're like, yeah, this is actually awesome. This is nice. Anyways, the funny thing is that those videos compared to what the product was at the end was actually much lower. We had to redo all those original videos because we ended up doing it at a much higher level quality, and it just took off in a very, very crazy way. And it's what tremendous chus, not only in Lubavitch, but also many communities outside of Lubavitch, many people learning Tanya because of that. And the Mir Hashem, Yadi Nitoya, and hopefully with other projects in this area.
So two questions. One about skipping to the end about Let's Talk Tanya. One going back to as a mashpia. Let's start with the end. When you had this idea to send a voice note of, you said a thought on the daily Tanya. What do you see the need as? Was it simply as a kitzer of the day's Tanya for people to push it, just to have a kitzer on the Tanya? So whether it's someone who's not yet up to learning chitas could hear just a kitzer, or someone who is learning chitas and wants to know what's the kitzer, so similar to what you could find probably on Chabad.org, or probably other things written up maybe. A kitzer on the Tanya, or did you lechatchila have in mind it shouldn't just be a kitzer, it should be like a thought on the Tanya, meaning like either let's say how to make the point of Tanya practical on a Vaididika level, or explanation of one of the concepts in Tanya on a Haskaladika level. What was your first goal in Let's Talk Tanya?
So that was a very long and thought-out question. You're not going to like my answer. I don't remember. I actually don't remember. I remember I was going to do a voice note. And what was the original kavanah? I don't remember. Obviously, it evolved to what it is. I actually don't remember if I had that deeply thought out exactly what was going to be the specific niche in which I'm going to fit in. Right. I don't remember.
And so, in other words, was it even that you were looking for a niche, or was it like, yeah, why not? I teach Tanya. Let me do a kitzer on Tanya.
Yeah, probably that.
So then it might have been more like a kitzer.
Yeah, but I just have to climb back into my head from 5 years ago, and Let's Talk Tanya has evolved since then. And yeah.
Okay, so then going back to when you were a mashpia teaching, when you started off in Mesivta, and I'm assuming in Mesivta already you taught Tanya. Actually, on that note, when you were a Bacher Mesivta, they didn't learn Tanya? You were saying that like people were saying like, oh, Samach Vav. Mesivta didn't learn Tanya?
Mesivta learned Tanya, yeah.
But that's it, just Mesivta.
Just Mesivta. And it was, and Zal, and by the way, that it has a certain stigma. It's something you learn in Mesivta, and Zal, we didn't learn Tanya.
I think it's still like that.
Maybe.
Yeah. Aha, okay. So
and when I went to Eretz Yisrael, so over there you had Remendel Futterfass would give us Shir Tanya every single day to end the last, like, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes of the second Seder Nigla. But when I got there already, he wasn't doing it anymore. That was Tafshin and Dalit, so that was...
no, it was last year?
Second to last year, yeah. But it was his last year in Kfar Chabad, because the next year he was ready. He was in England. He wasn't feeling well. Rabbi Ginsburg of Pnini HaTanya fame gave the share, but it wasn't...
And still last 15 minutes of Seder Nigla? That was interesting. Yeah. So in Tomchei Temimim,
like 6:45 at night, something that's right, yeah.
Right. They used to have that. There's a whole mice in Tomchei Temimim of like back in Russia or Poland that there was. You're aware of this? That there was I heard a story. But so when you became a mashpia in Mesivta, and you were teaching Tanya in Mesivta, this is I guess the same type of question, but maybe as mashpia was stronger. What did you feel what did you feel that was lacking in the way Tanya was taught? Because in Mesivta it was being taught. Yeah, so let's start with that. What did you feel was lacking in the way it was taught, especially from your koch as a bacher that you described?
So I feel that a lot of my answers are going to disappoint you. I started teaching Tanya in Mesivta at the grand old age of 21 years old. which itself, by the way, is a little of a commentary on how important Tanya is in the curriculum and the fact that you give it to a 21-year-old Bacher to teach it, as talented as he may be. And I had one very, very clear goal, which is to control my class. And that was it. And it took me years after that before to really... I mean, when I started learning Tanya, the 18, 19, 20s, I was appreciating more the Haskalah of Tanya. And slowly but surely, you start realizing that this Tanya, which everyone, the Haskalah is what all I've been exposed to over these years is actually very, very relevant to my life. But when I started teaching Tanya, I was not there yet. So I was definitely, very much koching sich in the minutiae, as they would say, right? And the diukim and the haskalah as opposed to the larger picture. By the way, the relevance emerges from the larger picture. It's part of because if you look at Tanya as actually as a program, and I don't want to say these words, but it is. It's a self-help program. That's what it is. It's which starts with Perek Aleph and ends through Perek Nun Gimel. And if you're overly focused on any single Perek and just here's where it's at, and missing that this Perek is part of a context, and it might be beautiful ideas, but it's one step in a larger program. But that took years.
So when you started as a young Magachir Mashpia, it was just the same, like the way you learned it in yeshiva, like explain the diyokim and make sure they understand the 15 taichin of the word Tanya, and get to a certain point in Tanya by the end of the year. Yeah,
but also, as you know, because I believe I've spoken to you off the record about this before, I question how much 14-year-old Bacham are able to anyways grasp the emotional depth of Tanya and the real relevance of Tanya. I don't know if they're mature enough at that point anyway, so I don't know if I did such a huge disservice to the Bacham I was teaching, considering that, I don't know, I'm very torn about that, about how Tanya should be taught to teenagers and at what age should they be exposed to it. And I had a thought that younger Bachrim, they should be learning Shayachas V'Mana, not L'Kotei Amarim. By the way, I'm not saying Kavlu Daiti, and obviously, but there's a svara in my head.
From the academic viewpoint of understanding Tanya, of knowing Tanya, this is and knowing 14-year-olds.
Yeah, because there's two. Tanya is made up of Shreicha V'Muna, which is the theology of Tanya, the philosophy of Tanya, and then there is Kutei Amarim, which is the practical relevance, Kikara Ve'Lecha. And I believe that kids at a younger age are able to relate to the abstract philosophy or theology of Tanya at an earlier age, and they're able to relate to the real-time, real-life issues that Tanya discusses in the Kotei Amarim, which is a thought that came to me.
And what about Avodah?
What do you mean?
How they not going to get the Avodah from Tanya?
Maybe a little later in life.
But they're living through life already then.
To put it in different words. So yeah, they're living through life then, but to take, I don't know, maybe yeah, but to take Tanya to make it relevant to their lives, maybe it takes someone who's greater than me or a better mechanech than me, such as you. The idea of Hisavos Tmidus, right? The idea of Yichud, the idea is discussed in Shariach V'Amuna. That's something a 14-year-old can understand. I can understand as well as I can understand, because it doesn't require an incredible amount of depth.
You're saying a personal depth of
yeah, and being in touch with yourself really in a deep way. Yeah, self-awareness. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Kutei Amarim is a different story. It's all about the struggle. It's all about what's going on inside of you, and it requires a certain amount of.
So, I mean, tell me if this is what you're thinking. I don't want to turn this into a chinuch thing, for sure not, and definitely not like how to structure a mesifta, but theoretically, let's say if you were explaining this idea, this pitch. So you're not saying that, of course, that young Bachrim shouldn't learn Chassidus Avodah, just maybe, I don't know, just Avodah, maybe whatever, we're saying something like that.
Yeah.
Fine. So that's what I thought you would say. But what about the element of Tanya being Teresh B'Chsav? Does that mean in the sense of, let's compare to Nigla for a second. In Nigla, you can't learn Gemara if you don't know Chumash, at least the relevant parts of Chumash that you're learning about in Gemara. So when we call, and you'll tell me who it's from, the Vart that Tanya's Teresh B'Chsav Chassidus. Chassidim? The Rebbe quotes it, but...
I think it's from the Friedrich Rebbe. I'm not sure. Okay. I think so.
So this Vart, which, for sure the Rebbe quotes a lot. It's a real Vart, that Tanya's Teresh B'Chsav Chassidus. Doesn't mean in that sense also that it's the building blocks that you can't go, learn another Vart of Chassidus if you don't have the basic awareness of, I don't know, let's say, Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Bahamis, and the struggle. Or Tanya meaning Teresh B'Chsav is that like you could boil everything back down to Tanya and reverse engineer and find it hinted out in Tanya, like that kind of meaning of Teresh B'Chsav. But yeah, you could start learning Avodah in other places. Well, how do you think? Like,
I don't know. But one thing is for sure that if you look in the letters from the Rebbe, whenever the Rebbe spoke to people about starting Tanya, it was never with Likutei Amarim. And there are quite a few letters about this, starting either with Shar Yichud Muna, and then moving on to Geras HaTshuva, and then Likutei Amarim, or sometimes Geras HaTshuva first, then Shar Yichud Muna, and which is very interesting, even for those.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So then why Taka? Why?
I don't know.
So you think that this is really the way it should be done, or it was
again,
like?
Tanya, this was there are quite a few letters, people who are starting from Chassidus and asked about learning Tanya, and which to me is a little interesting. In other words, because you would think that the Avodah comes before the Haskalah. But...
and is that what you think it is? That the reason why the Rebbe is saying to start with Shaykh Benoni, you think it's because that Haskalah needs to come before the Avodah, or a different reason?
I don't know.
None of the letters seem to give a reason.
I don't remember. Nothing stuck out at me from those letters.
Right. Okay. So let's track it back. So you learned Tanya as a bacher. You got very farkocht in like what you missed out on in Masifta. What you didn't get to appreciate in Masifta. So you started teaching Tanya, but you started repeating the vicious cycle of Mashpiyim doing what they did in Masifta in Yeshiva, and then you advanced to starting to teach Tanya and maybe on a more real level, I would say, to real audiences, as opposed to a bacher who's being forced to come and put his head down and not put his head down in class. And all of a sudden, Tanya started becoming more. I mean, you didn't really say this. I'm kind of putting this into your words, but.
It was a long evolution. It was not something that happened that they can't point to a certain point and say, "Oh, this is what had happened," or that's. But over the years, and suddenly it's like Tanya becomes more and more alive. And
as we're teaching it, like you said before, you're teaching it more. You start appreciating it more,
and as you're learning it more, and
Yeah. Okay. So this is a big.
By the way, teaching women, I taught for many years. I taught a class in Machan Chana and Tanya. Not Machan Chana. Machan Chana had a program called iLearn, which was basically Lubavitch women here in Crown Heights. By the way, that Tanya year that continued and only ended last year.
For how long?
I was probably doing it for 12, 13 some years. Finished the whole Kutei Amarim, finished the whole Geras HaKodesh with the whole Shar Yichud V'Amuna, I think, a lot of Kuntei Sachar, the later program, and then the Kutei Amarim a second time.
So it was the whole 5 Svarim.
Not the whole 5 Svarim. I didn't do Geras HaTshuva.
Oh,
because another teacher was doing Geras HaTshuva.
Okay.
And I didn't do the first program Kuntei Sachar.
Okay, fine. But almost besides the Geras HaTshuva, almost all Tanya, and then again the Kutei Amarim, and that took 13 years, a weekly shir.
Something of that sort, yeah. But my point is that women, they process things differently than men. Yeah. So it forces you also to think in a certain direction when you're learning Tanya. They're not as abstract. To the contrary. So I remember the first time I taught a women's class. I taught Perik-based Tanya. So I taught Perik-based Tanya a few times already to men, and I was always remember how exciting it is teaching the Hagah and teaching about the Machlekes between the Maharal and the Rambam, about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there's a Pshitos, there's Hashem Chachma. And every time I taught it, everyone was so excited. And I'm teaching it to these women, and their eyes are glazing over. And like, it was a big lesson to me. It was like this whole, the whole abstract philosophy just didn't talk to them. But it also forces you to find a different language, and that language actually is a very incredibly relevant language.
Right. What about you? You said that the abstract philosophy doesn't talk to them as much, but let's say when it comes to Shaykhut V'Amunah.
Yeah. Doesn't talk to them as much.
So it's not about that. It's like a Pilpul, Maral, and then Rambam and whatever, and Kabbalah, but just any concept that's not, if it's not able to be practicalized.
Yeah, listen, there's a reason why women are Malchus. Men are Zal, women are Malchus. They're much more concrete.
Mm-hmm. So and did you find yourself needing to do that, let's say in Shaykhut V'Amunah, of bringing a practical example for everything, or no? This is
practical example. It's about showing why it's relevant to my life. It's not about, but the thing is, what I gained from that is that I started doing that in all my classes, including to the men's classes, and that became like that's like, of course, when you learn a Perek, you have to show the people how it's relevant in their lives, even if it does seem to be abstract. So that became a kind of a signature, which probably led into very much into Let's Talk Tanya, that Nakuda.
Mm-hmm. And it's a great topic if you want to head into that about, like, women maybe might need it more, but you said that you started doing it more for men. Is that what Chassidus needs to be? Does Chassidus need to become relevant in every person's life? Does every part of
relevant Chassidus? What's that question all about? What's that question all about?
What's wrong with learning a parak of Tanya and appreciating the Haskalah of it?
There's nothing wrong with appreciating Haskalah, but there's something very right in bringing everything down a little bit pale.
Is it a bonus feature, or is that what Chassidus is all about?
It's even where the Rebbe says that the Indian of Chassidus, I think it's in Kislev, that the Indian of Chassidus is to take every single thing that you learn. And there is talking about Nigla.
You Gimel Kislev, I think.
Okay, so what's in Nigla to understand what its shirish is in the Ilmus Al Yenim, and to know what the Hira is for yourself. So Madach, when you're learning Shirish Anagach Sapari, you're learning a piece of Gemara to Solachas Kama Vakama when you're talking about Chassidus.
Right.
Now at the same time, there's one of my favorite sichas is Mishpatim in Chelik Aleph. Look at the sichas Chelik Aleph. Ooh. You'll get there. Ooh, let me know when you get there. Okay. That's right.
That's the Sharon Simla.
Oh, yeah. But so that's the first sikha. So later on, there's the sikha in Kesef Salvasami.
Okay.
So the Rebbe there talks about learning Chassidus every day. And that even on a day when you're not very, even if it was the day Reisa that Abandan Kumva say Shev Al Tasa, don't miss your Shir Chassidus and that, don't miss your learning Chassidus in that day. And also the Mashmos says, don't miss your Avodas Hatfilah. Avodas Hatfilah on that day. And there the Rebbe says, on that very day, you should learn Chassidus, learn a Maimer, and Lav Dafka and Aveda Dika Maimer, but even a Haskalah Dika Maimer, and even if it's such a deep Haskalah, you have no idea how to make it practical or relevant in any way. Which is interesting, the vita of the Rebbe over there.
Right. Okay, so there's everyone knows that Chassidus is supposed to be practical. I think it's a balance. I don't know if this is not particularly the topic that I don't know if you want to get into this, but the question is, like, is it a bonus feature or not? How mechuyev are you when you learn a mimer to stop and make sure that you could connect to it on a concrete, practical level in a relevant way of your life, versus, like, you could appreciate that you learned a sugya, you learned a mimer, and not saying not to try to figure out a lesson in Avaida, but it's totally fine if you didn't get there.
Yeah.
How many
Marim are there from the Rebbe that where the Rebbe doesn't end with some sort of practical application and relevance?
And like you said, even sichas that are nigla sichas.
My point is that this is something that Rebbe kind of trained us in. This idea that when you learn something, you have to carry it on. What does it mean to me?
Right. Not as a bonus feature. Saying this is the right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably connect it also that the Rebbe is atzmos, so everything has to fuse together automatically.
Oh, okay, I love this verse. Can we talk more about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I get excited when I hear such hey, look right there.
Absolutely. Go for it. What when the Rebbe...
No, see, you realize that you just lost me when you said those words for the exact reason what we're talking about over here right now?
Of course.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. So let's break that down. So when you learn any mimer of the Rebbe or any sikha of the Rebbe, especially in the later years, and the Rebbe is using oisius of atzmos, the Rebbe is talking about the kesher atzmi or the inyan atzmi or the atzmos, or about the connection to atzmos. And we don't really have words to explain what atzmos are on a definitive term, right? Because part of what atzmos is that if you define it in a certain way, then probably that's not atzmos. It's one element in which atzmos could be manifest, could be expressed. So that's, I think, where there's a big challenge of what we're talking about, of how practical is atzmos. Not how practical is atzmos itself, but how practical is it to always be focusing on atzmos as opposed to something else?
It's a great question. Could we do that for our next?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, this is it's all right. Let's back up.
we're sitting here in the week of Parshas Chayesara, right? Chayesara and Nunveis. So just we can have a whole podcast just on whole episode just on that.
That's the Knesset Shluchim.
Yeah.
So so let's back up. But it's still about this vart of relevance. Okay, so let's go back to Tanya. So you're learning Tanya, and especially in let's say you're not a 14-year-old bacher that maybe can't get it to a certain extent, but you're learning Tanya and you're learning about the Beinoni. And you're not just learning about the Benoni, it's Sefer Shel Beinonim. So if we plug in that question of how relevant and how practical it should be, this opens up a famous can of worms. So I'm gonna steal your line because we've spoken many times. You say this line. Do you know of a Benoni? Right? So, there's a reason why you asked that question. What happens when you ask that question to most people? I'll let you talk.
Do you know of a Beinoni?
Yeah. What's the question they usually ask? You usually ask...
do you want to be a Beinoni?
That's another question.
I don't recall asking, do I know of a Beinoni? I kind of figured you are, by the way.
Uh-huh. Well,
unless you've graduated since and become a tzaddik.
Okay. Then I'm a Benoni.
Unless you've graduated.
Right. A tzaddik v'Benoni loy. A new dargan tzaddik, maybe. I'm a Benoni, so why am I a Benoni? So you're saying you know a Benoni, and I'm a Benoni. Why am I a Benoni to you?
There are many people who I know who by me are the suffix of whether they're a Benoni. I can't know for sure, but there are many people who I know by the people Yiddish Shemayim B'Tachlis and Swimerav Asaytev, holy Jews.
When most people learn about the Benoni, when you teach Tanya, to how do you present the Benoni?
I talk about it a lot. It's not something which is a regalachas. I talk about it a lot. Yeah.
So when you get to
I don't start teaching Tanya before I give a complete class on the topic of Sefer Shel Beinonim, what it means. What's your question?
How practical is it for a regular person to be a Benoni?
To paraphrase Moshe Rabbeinu, Karev Moed.
So when you look at Parak Yud Beis...
And by the way, if we didn't believe Moshe Rabbeinu, because maybe we figured that maybe 3,000 years ago things are a little... So now Alter Rebbe comes and reinforces, so we know for sure that must be correct.
Parak Zayin. You're saying when he says Torah Nitzchis and...
The whole Tanya is based on this idea of Karev that being a Benoni is Karev.
Right.
And by the way, Karev doesn't mean easy, just by the way, stop. In terms of translations, Karev means practical, accessible, it's possible.
Right.
But... Let's reframe Tanya. It's not about being a Beinoni. It's not about being a Beinoni. First of all, let's try to use English words. It's about self-mastery. What is a Beinoni? A Beinoni is someone who struggles. And we'll talk more as we go along. We'll actually get to maybe more precise and a better definition of what Beinoni is, but on a very simple level. Beinoni is someone who struggles and nevertheless does what he or she knows is the right thing to do. In English, the word for that is self-mastery, self-control. Self-mastery and self-control, which in Tanya words are known as Me'ach Shatal Alev. We all want self-mastery. We all want to have a greater degree of self-control in our own lives. And Me'ach Shatal Alev means it's possible, right? Are we giving up on ourselves? No. So if I'm struggling and I want to gain self-mastery, Tanya gives you the tools how to do that. So how's that not relevant? A Beinoni is someone who struggles but nevertheless is successful. So what are you going to say? You're going to say, I don't know if I'll get it there 100% of the time. I'm not. Why do we have to argue about that? Why is that relevant?
That's the first question that comes up when you learn Tanya and you learn the Alter Rebbe's definition of a Beinoni. The Alter Rebbe makes it sound very absolutist.
To get to the top level of Beinoni, it's an absolute certain something, yeah. And if I don't get there, then it's useless. If I understand the methodology, what is the point Alter Rebbe is saying here? Alter Rebbe is saying, I understand that you struggle. I want to teach you how to be successful when you struggle. So if right now I am successful in struggles 20%, and I'm very bothered because I want to be successful in other areas. So I look, so what's Tanya? Tanya teaches me how to be successful. So let's say I'll get from 20% to 80%. How is that not the most relevant sefer that I have?
If you look at it as that concept, but Doesn't it sound like the Alter Rebbe doesn't frame a Beinoni like that? In other words, let's say we grew up in yeshiva, so we get to Perikid Beis, and it's the $1 million question. Alter Rebbe defines a Beinoni. It's the definition of a Beinoni. Perikid Beis, Beinoni, who that Shalom, the Nefesh Bahamas does not control him, not b'dibur, not b'machshava, not b'maisa. And loy avar miyamav loyaver loylam v'loy nikolav shem rasha filu shah achas v'rega echad kol yamav. The Alter Rebbe mamish puts it in 3 lines that a Beinoni is someone who never did an Aveira, never will do an Aveira, never it goes into Russia zone even for one moment of his life. And we already appreciate what a Russia is from Paragid Aleph. So we already know that a Russia is someone that even once has a Machshava Dibur Ma'isa of an Aveira. Fine. So that's the definition of a Beinoni. Then you continue reading the rest of Sefer Shal Beinoni. And yes, the Alter Rebbe, first of all, Paragid Aleph, Alter Rebbe says that everybody could be a Beinoni. And then, of course, there's the anxiety that the Beinoni deals with. And Alter Rebbe spends all those Chaf Prakim, Lamed Prakim, etc., dealing with the feelings of the Beinoni and the depression that the Beinoni might have. Why did Hashem do this to me? Why do I have to struggle? So it starts feeling more practical as you go through Tanya. But the definition of the Beinoni, the Alter Rebbe's opening words of Beinoni it sounds not practical.
Shmuel, I love you, but I feel you didn't hear what I just said before. You're very focused on your question. I'm trying to tell you something. I feel that you didn't hear it, but it's fine. What?
Yeah, you said that Tanya is giving you a way that you could become better in your life. So, but that doesn't.
Tanya is about self-mastery,
right?
If I want more self-mastery, learn Tanya. Now, how much self-mastery will I attain? As much or as little as I avail myself of the tools that Tanya gives me. And if I want to go all the way, I could go all the way. And if I don't, and if I go for less, whatever degree of self-mastery I want, the answer is going to be in Tanya.
So why does Alter Rebbe need a Beinoni to be the guy who's like Avar V'Layavar?
Okay, so
why can't we talk about the Oivid Elikim and Practicality?
Very good. Okay, so let's talk about that. But if you want to talk about that, we really need to back up. I need to talk about what a Beinoni is.
Let's go.
And to go a little deeper than the average understanding. Where do we start?
Not very good base.
So, if I were to ask you, if you have a person whose Nefesh Elikis and Nefesh Bahamas are both at full strength, neither one of them has managed to, in any which way, compromise the other. Neither one of them has managed in any which way to gain an unnatural upper hand over the other. What's the name of that person?
Benoni.
Benoni. Okay, that's good, because most people would answer Russia, because the obvious question is, right? Obvious question is,
he's feeling the
then
desire.
why is the person doing only mitzvahs if the Nefesh Bahamas is at full strength? And the answer to that is because so when they're both at full strength, the Nefesh Elikis and Nefesh Bahamas are both at full strength. So the result will be that the person will only do mitzvahs, because a Nefesh Elikis at full strength will always be able to defeat the Nefesh Bahamas at full strength. So that is a Beinoni.
And let's just clarify, and he's still not tzaddik because he has a desire to do averos that he has to conquer.
No. He's not a tzaddik because he's not a tzaddik. Because what is a tzaddik? Let's talk about what a tzaddik is.
That he doesn't even have a tzahara.
A tzaddik is someone who there's an imbalance. The Nefesh Elikis has gained an advantage over the Nefesh Bahamas.
Of?
Either it could be in a way of a knockout blow, in a way of transforming it, but as opposed to the Beinoni, where the Nefesh Elikis and Nefesh Bahamas are both at full strength, neither one of them have a shlita, in the words of Tanya, over the other one. The tzaddik, there is a degree the Nefesh Elikis has gained the upper hand. Not only the upper hand in terms of because of Meir Shat Al-Alev. Meir Shat Al-Alev means only that Nefesh Elikis wants one thing, Nefesh Bahamas wants something else, so the person will do l'payil what the Nefesh Elikis wants. No, but that's not a shlita over the Nefesh Bahamas.
Right. Shlita over the outcome.
It's a shlita over what the person is going to do.
Right.
You know, the third judge.
Right.
By the tzaddik, the Nefesh Elikis actually has gained an advantage over the Nefesh Bahamas, has control over the Nefesh Bahamas. So there's an imbalance. The Rasha is someone who there's another imbalance. The balance is the other way around, which is that the Nefesh Bahamis has gained an advantage over the Nefesh Elikis. The Nefesh Elikis has been weakened. Just like by the Tzaddik, the Nefesh Bahamis has been weakened. By a Rasha, the Nefesh Elikis has been weakened. That is what a Tzaddik, a Beinoni, and a Rasha is. So if someone comes along to you and says that if you do an Aveira, you're a Rasha. You do an Aveira, you become a Rasha. That's not true. No, you do an Aveira because you're a Rasha. A Rasha is an internal state. It's a state where there's an imbalance where your Nefesh Elikis has been weakened. If your Nefesh Elikis has been weakened, you are going to do Aveiros. Now, how many Aveiros are you going to do?
1 second, what about Bechira Choshes?
Oh, really not.
Why?
Because your Bechira is in working on yourself.
You're saying the Bechira is to get to that state?
Yeah.
Really?
But really for another time.
Okay.
How many, if your Nefesh Elikis has been weakened, how many Aveiros are you going to do? So it depends how big of a Rasha you are. The bigger Rasha will do more Aveiros. A lesser Rasha will do less Aveiros. But you don't become a bigger Rasha by doing more Aveiros. The contrary. The bigger the imbalance, which makes you a bigger Rasha, the more Aveiros that you're going to do. If the imbalance is a smaller imbalance, then you're a smaller Rasha. A smaller Rasha, the smaller Aveiros. Meaning, Nefesh Elikis has the advantage of Me'er Shat Alev. So, if the Nefesh Elikis has only been weakened a little, so then to a large degree the Me'er Shat Alev is still there. Only when the person is under a lot of stress and once in a while will it crack and the person will do an Aveira. The more the Nefesh Elikis is weakened, the more Aveiros the person will do. But Tzaddik, Rasha, Beinoni are internal states. So if I were to ask you, what happens if a Beinoni does an Aveira? What would your answer be?
So previously my answer would be now he's not a Benoni.
And now you know that it's a trick question.
Right.
Right? There's no such thing.
Right.
If you did an Aveira, it's because he's not a Beinoni. Because a Beinoni can't do an Aveira. That's an internal state. This is huge. Why is it huge? Because this is not a small idea. In the first Perek of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe moves us away from the conventional understanding of Tzaddik, Beinoni, Rasha. And the obvious question is why? What's bothering him? The way it's conventionally understood, and the way in most places in Chazal, Tzaddik is someone who's mostly mitzvahs, and Rasha is someone who's mostly Aveiros, and a Beinoni is someone who's half and half. Alter Rebbe, no. Now think about it for a second. If the goal of Tanya is Kikar V'Elecha Davar Miyod, why is it that we have to change definitions in order to get to Kikar V'Elecha? Make it a Sefer Shel Tzaddikim, if you get what I'm saying.
Right.
Go with the conventional understanding, and it's a Sefer Shel Tzaddikim. Why does Alter Rebbe, and by the way, this is a Chiddush of Alter Rebbe's.
The whole Benoni
The whole
picture.
Tzaddik, Beinoni, Rasha is a Chiddush of Alter Rebbe's.
Right.
Why does Alter Rebbe have to do that? And traumatize Yidden, Atzev Kol Aderes, not Lubavitchers. Because we're not traumatized.
Because we're desensitized.
Oh, no, we're Rishaim. I was a Rasha, I am a Rasha, I will be a Rasha, and I think we should have a Rasha Pride Parade tomorrow down Eastern Parkway, and I'm going to go with a lot of, with my flag, because every Lubavitcher knows a Rasha. But you should know that outside of Lubavitch, when people learn Perek Aleph, it's a huge problem.
Right.
I've experienced this personally. People who push you tell me I'm a Rasha? I know someone reached out to me, a shlucha somewhere, teaching a class to Frumal ladies, and the class almost blew up because of this thing. Why does Alter Rebbe have to do that?
Can I just throw in the story in my family is that when my great-grandmother, Bobby Rabashkin, Slanga Yarn, when she was a kid in Neville learning, so her father, Zil Chazanov, hired him Lamed to teach them Tanya. And she came home first day crying. She learned Perek Aleph. So now I know what a Tzaddik Rasha Beinoni is. So what are we? So her father answered, "Wir seien Stam Yidden."
And let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Bobby Rabashkin is not a Beinoni?
Bobby Rabashkin is a Beinoni.
So,
that's absolutely true.
So going back to what we were talking about beforehand.
Bobby Rabashkin is not everybody.
I didn't say everyone's a Beinoni. I didn't say that. But every person knows that Yidden or Poshet, good Yidden or Nizar in Shomar Avasetev. Absolutely. 100%.
Oh, okay. But 1 second. So going back. So this is so the way we learned it in yeshiva, the classic thing when you get to this $1 million question of every person could be a Beinoni, but Beinoni never did Avera.
You're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead. We still have a ways to go.
Okay.
Still have ways to go.
So you're saying, so why did Alter Rebbe have to do this?
The classical way of understanding Tzaddik Beinoni Rasha is about behavior. How many mitzvahs did you do? How many Averas did you do?
Right.
And the Alter Rebbe feels a very strong need to tell us, no. I need to pull you away from that, away from behavior, and explain to you that Tzaddik Beinoni Rasha is who you are. Not what you do, but is who you are.
Right.
Okay. Which is very interesting, because you think about it for a second. The Beinoni and the Tzaddik of Tanya, in terms of behavior, are the exact same.
Right.
But they might have the same behaviors, but they're completely different people. In what way? One of them has a full strength nefesh habahamis, the Beinoni, and one of them, the nefesh habahamis, has been radically weakened. These are internal states. These are internal states that express themselves in behavior, but they're not about behaviors, which is why the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Aleph that Tzaddik Beinoni Rasha, the way the world understands it, is a Shem HaMushal. Shem HaMushal doesn't mean it's wrong.
Right.
V'haraya Chazal use these words. What does Shem HaMushal mean? It's true, but it's true to describe the behavior. It's not true to describe you. Toyar, Shem HaToyar, is when I want to say, are you a tzaddik? The truest definition is not about your behavior, but it's what's going on inside you. We're talking here about a state. Okay. Which, by the way, this is also connected to the whole revolution of Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Bahamis, as opposed to Yitzhak Yitzhahara, because Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Bahamis also is not about behavior; it's about identity.
Yeah.
Right. So this, everything's connected. Now let's fast forward to Perikut Beis and Tanya.
1 second. Did that answer why the Alter Rebbe had to do that? In other words, and why did Alter Rebbe want to talk about who you are versus what you do?
Because this is Chabad. This is Chabad. This is not a just do it. This is not, you didn't do mitzvahs, try harder. The whole Chabad is about avodah, changing yourself. Teresh B'Ksav Chabad is not about, let me teach you what to do. It's about starting with Chabad, starting with you, by changing your perceptions, your understandings, the things, right, the way your perspectives, which then changes your feelings and changes your behaviors. So we always start in the deepest part. We always start with the deepest part, which is our seichel. So this is the Yesod of Chabad. And someone who takes Tanya and reduces it to behaviors is missing out the entire point.
Right.
Okay. Let's fast forward now to Perikut Beis. Now we understand Tzaddik Beinoni Rasha are internal states. So Alter Rebbe says a Beinoni is someone, what the words he uses. A Beinoni is someone that the Ra within never is powerful enough to actually to conquer the small city. Beinoni never did an Avera, and V'liyavar Leilam never will do an Avera. He was never called a Beinoni Rasha even one moment for his entire life. Now, let's remember, Beinoni is not about behavior; it's about internal states. So we have to understand everything, because first of all, there's obviously so many questions of where the Rebbe himself says, "What does this mean?" But how is it possible to say that if you did an Avera, you can't be a Beinoni? So first, let's establish one thing. One more thing I want to establish. A person whose nefesh elokis is weakened in any which way can't be a Beinoni by definition. Correct.
So it has to be balanced.
It's not balanced. I don't like the word balanced, even though. Because balance, in the natural state, the nefesh elokis will enjoy superiority or sovereignty over the nefesh habahamis, but
because of Meshal Talev.
Because Meshal Talev, yeah. But if the nefesh elokis is weakened, then by definition you're a Rasha. That is the definition of a Rasha. What is the most common thing that weakens a nefesh elokis? It's very practical. Averis.
Right. Okay.
I don't mean that in a spiritual sense. I mean very practically if you take someone who's for the last 5 years or has never missed saying Chitas a day in their life, and then one night they come home and it's 11 o'clock at night, and they're exhausted and they have a headache and they're stressed and they're not in the mood and they're, their boss screamed at them that they, what are the chances they're going to miss Chitas that day? Very, very slim. Come on, right?
Conditioned.
That's what I do.
Right.
What about someone who missed Chitas 2 weeks ago, one day, and a month ago a day, and then 2 or 3 months ago a day? The chances of them missing Chitas is very, very high. In the words of Chazal, Aveira Gereres Aveira, which is not a spiritual thing, it's partially a psychological dynamic, or the idea of Avar Vishana Nasale Keheter. So the problem with having done an Aveira isn't the fact that you did an Aveira. The reason why Beinoni can't be someone who has an Aveira is not because in the past, I did an Aveira, I can't be a Beinoni now. How was me doing Aveira in the past impact my state now? If a Beinoni is a state, what might have come in 1 minute ago, 2 years ago? The answer is that the Aveira that you did exists in your present. To put it in somewhat different words, and forgetting, maybe fly a little high over here. There's the past, there's the present, there's the future. But the truth is, there's the past and the future as they exist in the present.
Why the future?
Why the future? Because if I look at you and say, I think that tomorrow you're going to do kach v'kach, because I know you. I'm a Yidei Chassidus. How do I know that? It's the future as it is. And if I know you well enough, I'll be able to predict. Not because we are right now.
Okay. Well,
all it is, your present reality is made up of your past, and therefore dictates your future.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So your state right now, when we're talking about your state includes your past, includes your present, and includes your future, but all as they exist in the current moment. Mm-hmm. Good. So Alter Rebbe is saying something over here. A Benoni can't have done Aveda. Why? Because then he can't be a Benoni. Because then he's weakened. Does that mean that he couldn't have done Aveda? Of course he could have done Aveda. But he has to now reach the point where that Aveda doesn't exist anymore. How long would it take, if I missed Chitas last week, how long would it take for me to get to a place where I am as strong as someone who never missed Chitas? It's possible. But it takes, first of all, repetition. It takes also focus. It takes certain learning about it, thinking about it, a certain passion. And then when I do that, I am a Benoni in that area. Because if I am not weakened any longer by the Aveira, then that Aveira doesn't exist. I saw Rabbi Evan Yisrael. Did you see what he says on Practicality?
No.
He's awesome. He says that sometimes a person looks at himself and says, I did something that wasn't me. You look back at something you did 5 years ago, I can't do something of that sort. I can't believe I did it. It wasn't me.
Right.
Or to use the words of the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, right? That about Tshuva, someone who says, I'm not that person, I'm someone else. Think about that for a second. What do you mean I'm not that person? You're not, yeah, it's true. You are not the person who you are today is not the person who did that Avera. And therefore, you don't have that connection even. It doesn't weaken you any longer. And you're a person that you're at a certain, so who's a Beinoni? Someone who hasn't been weakened by any Avera in the past, even if he or she has done Avera in the past, and someone who, because of their state, are not going to do an Avera. Now, tomorrow, maybe they won't be a Beinoni, they will do an Avera, but that's the future as it is in the future, not the future as it is in the present. This is so Yesodistic, because when you understand that a Beinoni is a state, what is that state? As opposed to, and anyone who I taught Tanya knows that this is a pet peeve of mine. You're familiar with this? My
go ahead.
Beinoni moments?
Oh, yeah. That's what I was going to get to. That's what we were taught in yeshiva.
So
that's
a Beinoni moment, taking Tanya, in my humble opinion, right. I'm going to get hate mail for this, but taking Tanya.
I'll
and
put your email on the link.
Thank you very much. Okay. Taking Tanya and using it as proof, or trying to use it as a source for a Beinoni moment is such a perversion of what Tanya is trying to accomplish.
Let's develop this, because this is big, because I think this is way most people teach Tanya. I think that the question in the question that you said before the Rebbe refers to as a kusha dua, which I want to go back to, is the Perkid Beis Alter Rebbe defines a Beinoni as Le'avar v'Le'avar. He never did, ever, never will. And Perkid Dal, Alter Rebbe says that a Beinoni midas kol adam v'achira kol dimim sheikh shekol adam yochel is Beinoni. That every person could be a Beinoni. So every person could be a Beinoni. So how could every person be a Beinoni if a Beinoni never did an Aveira and I did an Aveira? So that's the $1 million question. So, so first of all, in the Rebbe's Torah, over many sichas and mamarim and letters, so on every level of the Rebbe's Torah, the answer is
what I said.
Right,
that's not
which is that your current state is one that it's as if you never did an Aveira, and therefore you're likely not to do an Aveira. I think you developed it very beautifully, which is that it's not just like, oh, so it's a cop-out because you're talking about the current state. I think you framed it in the bigger picture of Tanya that, yes, the whole Tanya is about the current state.
Exactly. Once you understand what Alter Rebbe is trying to accomplish with Benoni, you realize it's not a little gimmick over here. It's actually a description of where we're moving people away from in terms of the understanding of Benoni, which is behavioral, right? Mm-hmm. Which in Perek Aleph, Alter Rebbe says, but it's a Shem HaMushal. And this is actually the most incredibly pithy, if I can use a fancy word, description of the Beinoni. It's right here.
Right. So what most people, I guess what you could say, miss with that is that the Alter Rebbe is sounding very absolutist, very literal. And a Beinoni, someone never did an Aveira. And I'll put in here, I know we discussed this in the past, that you have, let's say, from Rabbi Naftali Silberberg printed in Atomim, where Rabbi Naftali gives one suggestion. A Bacher submitted this question, Atomim, which was a journal in back in Poland, where Bacher were able to submit questions and they were answered by Mashpiyim in the future editions. And a Bacher asks this question, and Rabbi Naftali gives a whole 3-page answer, and one perspective in his answer, one derech that he goes with, not his maskana, but one derech he goes with is that you can't be a Beinoni if you didn't ever can't be a Beinoni. What are you getting all tied up about that? So I want to get back to that part of it, but so you have this way of learning Tanya in a very literal, absolutist way. That a Beinoni is someone who never did a Aveira, never will do an Aveira. So now we want to make it practical to, so Bacher comes to the Mashpia and says, so what's Tanya for me? I did an Aveira. So the Mashpia talks about the Beinoni moment. So why do you have to think about all or nothing? Why do you have to be 100 or 0? You right now you could be a Beinoni. Right now you could hold yourself back from doing an Aveira. Yeah, okay. So right now you could be a Beinoni. And now it's a avodah of furthering that experience of a Beinoni moment more and more quantity-wise throughout the rest of your day. So you're saying that that's feeding the perspective where the Alter Rebbe was being absolutist, and now we need to filter that into that it shouldn't be literally absolutist, because then I can't do it if it's an absolute avodah. Can't be all or nothing, because then I'm automatically by nothing. So you're saying, so the Mashpiyim say that, like, okay, so it's not literally all or nothing, but it's the all or nothing for right now.
Okay, you're mixing up two different things, in my humble opinion.
Okay.
There's the absolute, because everything I said is still very absolutist. It's a certain state of the Avar v'Le'avar. I have to be right now in a situation where I'm not weakened by any Avera, and where I'm in my state, Yedea love, Yedea Talmud. So that's also very difficult.
Correct. I'm talking about absolutist in time also. Like, in other words, that I cannot think about the future. A regular teenager, a regular bacher, he's saying, what do you mean? But I know myself. I know I'm going to do an Avera. So why should I even try to be a Beinoni now? Or the opposite, that I know my past.
So you want to tell someone, hello, for the next 5 minutes, don't do an Avera. Mm-hmm. It's a great thing.
Great.
Eibishter loves when people don't do Averas. For the next 5 minutes, you'll do mitzvahs. Awesome. But what's that to Tanya?
Well, what about Vasatas Nitzotam Tanya? Isn't Tanya supposed to be the guiding?
Ever since Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah 3,300 years ago, we knew we're not supposed to do Averas and supposed to do mitzvahs. And we also knew that sometimes if it's too much to bite off, so you do 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. What does that do with Tanya? What does that do with the Beinoni? Why are you using the word Beinoni? It has nothing to do with Beinoni. If you understand that Beinoni is a state, not doing an Avera for 5 minutes has nothing to do with being a Beinoni. Mm-hmm. It's a great thing to serve the Eibishter. But by doing that, you're giving people a misunderstanding of the Beinoni and of Tanya, of what we're trying to accomplish here.
So this maybe, now I think maybe I have more clarity on what you meant before about that. A 14-year-old bacher might not have enough self-awareness or maturity to be able to understand this, because you're saying that it's not about a sefer of getting you to do the right thing. It's a sefer of learning to appreciate a identity of who you are and who you should be. And you're saying maybe a bacher will get caught up in the behavioral part of it. Tanya's coming to help me be a better...
Halavai.
Well, fine, but yeah. No, but,
that's really the biggest problem that a bacher gets caught up.
But you're saying that's what Shulchan Aruch is for.
Yeah. No, no, that's not what I meant earlier. I meant the bacher relating to the different struggles that the Rebbe is talking about, and the national case, national Bahamas, and the Ritzoinus, and the Atzvos, and just many of these things that are...
A 14-year-old doesn't know what Atzvos is?
No. No.
Why not?
Do you know what Atzvos is?
Do I know what Atzvos is?
Can you tell me in English words?
Atzvos is feeling that there's no hope and no point to doing anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
This is for episode number 6. So, that's a whole. What Atzvos is a whole. Yeah. Here's a story. Reb Shmuel. As you may know, in instead of Benoni moments, I advocate for Benoni areas. Ever discussed this?
Maybe I don't remember that term.
A Benoni area is an area of struggle in your life to try to become a Benoni there. And that's real, because you want to reach the state of Benoni in that area of your life. Mm. Our lives, all of our lives, were made up of 3 columns. There's tzaddik areas, there's Benoni areas, there's Rasha areas. A Rasha area is an area where my nefesh is stronger, and therefore I fail anywhere between 100% of the time to 0.1% of the time. But if I fail in that struggle, all right. A Benoni is somewhere where there's no such thing as failing. Period. We all have those areas in our life. Example I always give is eating on Yom Kippur.
Okay.
Right? Every one of us is a Benoni in that area. And then tzaddik areas. A tzaddik area is an area. Let's say I don't. Not only I don't struggle, but I have a. Not only that I don't. Do something wrong. Actually, it's not even a struggle. I enjoy it. It's something which I have no taiva for something.
That would be the Yom Kippur example.
No.
Yom Kippur example is not a tzaddik.
If when someone brings me a slice of pizza on Yom Kippur, I start feeling nauseous, that would be a tzaddik.
Okay, that's what I thought you were going with.
No,
okay, like you don't even have a
the
taiva
example
to
I
eat.
give for a tzaddik area is when it comes to Pesach by night, the first night of the Seder, I'm not like, oh man, I have to do a Seder. Okay, but I'll go do it. Like Yom Kippur, I'm not excited about fasting. I want to eat.
Right.
It says,
okay. You feel hungry, but you don't think of eating. In
other words, also the Beinoni is someone that Alter Rebbe says that I want it, but it's not bepel mamish. A tzaddik doesn't want it.
So a tzaddik doesn't even feel hungry in Kippur?
I don't know if a tzaddik that feels hungry, but the thought of eating Pashat is like he's no desire to eat. Anyways, one day when I'll get there, I'll let you know the experience, what it's like. The point is, so if I say to you, would you like that you're learning chitas every single day? It should be like saying Kol Nidre Yom Kippur. In other words, just like on Yom Kippur, you do Kol Nidre, and there's nothing more to talk about. Is that an achievable goal? But the point is to get to the place where I'm someone who says chitas every day. Not I say chitas every day. I am someone who says chitas every day, because a Beinoni is not someone who does the right thing. He's a person who his matzav hanefesh is such that it's not shaykh otherwise. Mm-hmm. Because a Beinoni is always about the status. In certain areas in my life, it's not like so I'm asking you a question. You always fasted Yom Kippur, right? Okay. Do you think next year you'll fast Yom Kippur?
Yes.
Lo yaver. We have a lo yaver over here, right? Right. How do you know? How do you know it's next year? And can you tell me that 1,000,000% that you're going to fast? No, you can't. You have a chiddush. Right. But right now, Reb Shmuel Wagner, right? When it comes to that, is lo yaver v'lo yaver. How many other areas in your life are there that are lo yaver v'lo yaver? Now, what if I want to start adding areas? That's a Beinoni area, and that's real. And that's something which is real. A Beinoni moment, 5 minutes, boom. It wasn't me, it was behavior.
Behavioral.
And Tanya is about me. It's about transformation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so first of all, the 2 questions. Number 1 is when the Alter Rebbe writes that. So it's definitely much clearer the way you're saying it. as opposed to thinking that it's a matter of a whole life and time, literally, and then needing to for it, as all these questions are trying to for it. But it's still a very dramatic statement, which means it's still a statement saying "Le'avar v'le'avar," and now you need to teach it. So you're saying, you need to teach it based on what you learned throughout Tanya. So I think the question still is, why did Alter Rebbe have to start off like that? Why did the Alter Rebbe have to start off defining the Beinoni like that? Because at the end of the day, if we're talking about that it's relevant for every Yid, where they're holding now, they need to work on what you're saying, having a Benoni area, and another Benoni area, another Benoni area. And you're right, not a moment, because then it's not you, it's just what you're doing, but a Benoni area of your life. So, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that like basically describing the Ovid Elokim Perek Tesvav?
I'm listening. In what way?
The Ovid Elokim is someone who's constantly battling their Nefesh Bahamis and constantly growing in their service of Hashem, as opposed to the Eved, who already conquered that, already mastered that, or the Lo Yavodai, which is that it's easy for him. Fine, that's without getting into the nuances of practice. But the point is Ovid Elokim. So why can't we just define the Benoni as the Ovid Elokim? Why can't we just say the Benoni is someone who is struggling? But he's and throughout the parak, Alter Rebbe makes it very clear. But it's the beginning that throws people off. But the
Le'avar is also the Beinoni.
Yeah, exactly. So why can't Alter Rebbe just start off Beinoni hu the Ovid Elokim and describe that situation of the Ovid Elokim?
Because it's not.
Why not?
I don't hear the question. Why? Yeah.
Because the Yavar sets us up for this problem, sets us up for this question of absolute, like of all or nothing. Doesn't it sound like all or nothing? Yavar?
Yeah. Again, with a shallow look, but if you read the whole Tanya and you understand, we're not talking here. Very simple. Perek Yud, Tzaddik. Who's a tzaddik? Someone, the Magber Nefesh Elokis.
Correct.
Not behavior.
Correct.
Perek Yud Aleph. Rasha. Zel Lumazeh. Rasha v'tev Lumastar Rali Hainu Shatev Shbenaf Elokis. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is behavior.
So the fact that everyone is messed up, not everyone. There's so many people. They're learning it wrong. Don't blame them on Alter Rebbe. And Alter Rebbe is very clear. Starting from Perek Aleph, he's moving away from behavior, and he's telling you it's about a state. What is the state? That's what it is. Now, if you're saying that it's too much to accomplish in my entire life, okay, so start small. This area, that area.
Right. No, so that's exactly my question. So why is Alter Rebbe not allowing us that?
I don't know. In other words, if you're asking the deeper question, why is it that nowhere in Tanya does Alter Rebbe say explicitly, but by me it's another pasha that this is when I'm guiding people on Tanya.
Right, and
but why does it say explicitly? You know what? If it doesn't have to be everything. Start with something. Why does it say that? I don't know.
Okay,
it's a good question.
Yeah, and I told you this before. 2 years ago, I learned with a Yid from Williamsburg, Tanya, and that was an amazing experience, which you were the Shadchan. You set us up together. That was amazing. We learned from
still waiting for Shadchanis, by the way.
We learned from 6 a.m. to 6:45 a.m. every day, Monday through Thursday, and we covered from after Sukkot till Shavuos. We covered an entire 5 Svarim of Tanya. Obviously, extremely the Gersa. It was one of the best chavrusas that I had. Now, obviously, I had to know Tanya enough. I couldn't have been my first time learning Tanya like that, to teach it like that. But there were some days we did 3 prakim in one day. And it was I never ever learned Tanya like that. Even chitas, it's whatever it is. And certainly not in yeshiva. But this was like you like what you talked about before, the bigger picture. You got to see.
It's called binging.
We binge Tanya, and let's binge Tanya. That'll be your next one. So like I said, it gives you a glimpse of the bigger picture, which I think for sure I was missing out before I did that. And after I was on a high, I told my friends, you have to do this. You have to just sit down and learn Tanya like that, like 3 prakim at a time. And anyways, so when we got to Perek Beis, and we learned the Le'avar, and of course, I launched on with all the explanations, all the Rebbe Sichas, Mamar, and that. And he asked me, so why didn't Alter Rebbe write that? It shocked me. Like I never thought of that. And it was I was dumbfounded. Like, yeah, why didn't Alter Rebbe write that? Why did Alter Rebbe? This is the defining moment of the beginning. It's the climax of Tanya, in a certain sense. And Le'avar v'Le'avar, and then we have to farentfer. And again, whether we're going to farentfer it the other way, that's a Benoni moment, whether we're going to farentfer it the way you explained it, which I think is really true. And I want to get back to that in a second. But so that was his question. That's been bothering me. It's really been bothering me ever since the past few years. Taka, why did Alter Rebbe have to write it so hard? Now, I teach Gemara for a living, so I know what it means that Rabbi Naftali writes things cryptic, and we get the same question. Why did Rabbi Naftali have to write the Mishnah like that? Why couldn't you just explain it? The Gemara explained it. Okay, so that's beautiful. That's easy to answer because Rabbi Naftali wants to write in a way that will get you to break your head and to understand it. And because Taka and all the answers of the Gemara were all in Rabbi's mind when he wrote it. And not only that, you could say he learned it from Hashem. Hashem wrote the Chumash in the exact same way. Fine, but Tanya's not like that. Tanya is a relevant sefer. Is a relevant sefer, as we've been saying. So I think the question is a lot stronger Tanya than it is in Mishnayos. Like, why would Alter Rebbe write it like that and then need to have it explained?
So I think that Tanya. So basically, what I'm saying is that I think if Tanya is learned correctly and properly the entire time, but the focus being on this is about the person as opposed to about a behavior at any given moment. In other words, how many Lubavitchers would answer that question correctly about, is it true to say that if you do an Avera, you become a Rasha? I think 95% of people who learn Tanya would answer is correct. And it's not. It's not. Just learn Tanya again. You'll see.
You can explain it.
Because you're a Rasha, you do Averas. By the way, I give an example of this.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it accurate to say that because John killed someone, he's a murderer? Sounds right, no? Right. But it's not.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
He killed someone because he's a murderer. Think about that for a second. Shmuel, can I ask you a personal question?
Can I ask?
You ever killed anyone?
No.
Why not? Well, think about it. You've never been angry at someone? You're angry at someone. You pulled a gun, you killed them. Why haven't you killed anyone? You know why? Because you're not a murderer.
Right.
If you were a murderer, then you get angry at someone, you kill them. That's what a murderer does. That's the get of a murder, right? So if someone kills someone, it's Megala, that's who they were. You don't become, I'm obviously not talking about if you kill someone to kill someone by mistake. I'm talking about, right? And the Lahepach.
Although, by the way, this explains the Sikha of Shoigig. Why a Shoigig is in Sechel Gimel, I believe, from Vayikra, that why a Shoigig is the Asham Tali is more expensive than the Asham, because a person does a verb Shoigig, it shows where his nefesh is. Yeah. So I think that's a different topic.
And to a more pleasant example, if you see a poor person and you give him $1, are you a kind person because you gave him $1?
Right. No, it stops it. You gave it because you're a kind person.
That's Tanya. You're not a Rasha because you did an Avera. You did an Avera because of Rasha. Why did you do an Avera? Because there's an imbalance inside of you. That's what caused it. You couldn't do it otherwise. And once you understand everything Alter Rebbe is talking about internally, and therefore the journey of Tanya is an internal journey, so we don't make that mistake. We're obviously talking about your state, and we're talking about now because that's what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Now, at the same time, I do want to concede something, which is, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a mimer by Yuchai Yisara Tashmem Hey. Familiar with that mimer?
A little bit.
Okay. So there's a mimer there, which is, by the way, there's probably like, Baruch Hashem today, the Tanya Shalom came out, so it's very easy to look up everything. There's probably like 10 places where the Rebbe answers this question, where the Rebbe addresses this question of Li'aver, and every single place. And we're talking about starting in Rishimis, and in Igris, and in Siches, and in Mamarim, and in letters, right? The Rebbe always says what I said. The other way around. Right?
Yeah.
Good.
That based on the way you are now is that it's the person who did the Avera is not you, and you would never do this Avera.
Which is, again, exactly what... But in the context of Tanya, it makes so much sense that it's not a vertel. That's a deep understanding of what's going on over here, of the whole Tzaddik Ben Yirasha situation. Yeah. Then, that's on my Rabbi Yechaisara, the Rebbe says, suddenly the Rebbe says, and the Rebbe says, you could answer, there's Masavi. Alter Rebbe's not happy with that, right?
R19, if you want to check it up.
What is that? No, so you tell me.
Well, that because the Alter Rebbe adds so it's
Right.
mashma that it's more literal that he never did an Aveira.
So suddenly the Rebbe is reversing course on everything. And Shum Sefer Tanya also, the Rebbe adds a order in Shum Sefer Tanya, Matzavi Ata. This is
That's
the
the regular guy. Yeah.
Which is very clear that when the Rebbe is learning Pasha Pshat and Tanya, this is the way the Rebbe is saying it. So Tashmem Hey, which I believe is the last time by Santa which the Rebbe addressed it. So, answer this question. Or maybe there's a sikha that was Mugalated or something.
Okay.
Like Bahar Chayil Chavtas. I don't know what. Maybe when was that Mugel? The Rebbe talks about it over there.
I'm not sure.
The Bahar Chavtas. The sikha about famous sikha about.
Of course.
Kinyan
Paris. Yeah.
So there the Rebbe says suddenly I was not so happy with the answer he gave all these years, and the Rebbe gives a new answer, a radical answer that to Tshuva Me'ava. So therefore, his day is not like Kazachia. So therefore, you can reach a place where Taki there's no Averis Mepel Mamish. It would seem that Achri Kechle Sakel, the question that you're asking. So why didn't the Alter Rebbe write it in the way which is a little clearer? So I think that's what the Rebbe is addressing in Memhe. At the end of the day, you want to know why Taka, even though Pashup Shad remains the way that the Rebbe explained it 20 times. But why Taka, the Alter Rebbe used such absolutist terms to be Meramez, that there's something else also, which is on the highest level, the highest aspiration of the Beinoni is that you should reach a place of Tshuva Mi'ava where the Taka was no Averis. But I don't think that Maimer in Memhei comes to supplant and say and give over a different Pashut Pshat in Tanya as opposed to everything else that Rebbe said in the early years.
Right. So in other words, if I understand correctly, so the regular understanding of the Beinoni dealing with his past, in other words, dealing with this problem, Tanya, is that the past happened, but it wasn't you. It wasn't the person that you are now. It wasn't your identity now as a Beinoni. And the Memheid, the Rebbe is saying that the Beinoni could even embrace what happened because Tshuva Mi'ava, as the Rebbe quotes from the Gemara, as Tshuva Mi'ava, it uproots the Aveira, it uproots it and transforms it to a Zachias, to a positive experience. So the Beinoni could actually then embrace that experience of the past because it is part of his identity with his Tshuva Mi'ava. That's the difference. In other words, is it about ignoring the past because the past wasn't you, or is it the past was you, but it's fine because Tshuva Mi'ava transforms the past?
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, practical muscle. It's Friday night. You come home, you ate somewhere, and suddenly you realize, oh my gosh, the light is off in my bathroom. And you're annoyed. You're very annoyed. So what are the chances you're going to turn on the light? Well, I'm assuming the answer is somewhere between 0 and 0, right? Now imagine someone who's a Baal Tshuva. I don't mean a Baal Tshuva as in Chassidus, the term Baal Tshuva, but in the colloquial.
Baal Tshuva.
No, not literal. Not literal Baal Tshuva. The colloquial, what we call today a Baal Tshuva.
That's the literal Baal Tshuva, no?
Literal Baal Tshuva is what I want to become. So,
I would say that's the not literal Baal Tshuva. That's the... Okay,
we all have Averis, except for those people who are baiting them, right? And we have to do tshuva. It's just like they're Baal Tshuva and me not. Anyways, someone is there, and 4 weeks ago they decided to start giving Shabbos, and now they come home and the light's off. What are the chances they're turning on the light? Much higher, right? 4 weeks ago they turned on the light, and it's it's a mess. They need the. How long does it take for that person to get to, how long of keeping Shabbos and focus on Shabbos and enjoying Shabbos does it take for them to get to the place where they're just as strong as me and you in that area? I don't know. It's
exactly,
but it's definitely, but it happens. You have people here in Crown Heights, many people walking around the streets, hundreds, thousands of people who are Baal Tshuvas. So when they were 20, they were turning on lights in Shabbos, and today for them to turn on a light in Shabbos is just as mufrich as it is for me and you.
Mm-hmm.
That's this.
Right.
That's this. There is no fatal lurking.
Right.
Practical, and we can do that. In other words, Alter Rebbe is telling you that you can reach a place that not only that you're not doing Averis Pashut, you didn't do Averis. That's not who you are.
Right.
And that's pretty incredible. And if you can't do that in every area of life, yet, start with one area, start with 2 areas. But you can do that.
Yeah. So I wanna.
Let's say davening with a minion. An example, right? Stop the same idea, right? Some people by them chikli avra 3 times a day. Some people not. And if the person who's not that kind of person, so the smallest thing, can stop them. What if I want to become a Beinoni in that area? I want to become li'aver v'li'aver in that area. You could do it. That's the whole point. Any area that you want, and b'chal life as a whole, but specifically any area you want, you can reach a place of li'aver v'li'aver. And that's a very empowering idea.
So that was a great finale in a way, and I don't want to ruin that. So I want to get back to that. But first, back up. You mentioned Tanya Shalim, and they collect all the things from Alter Rebbe, all the pirushim from Alter Rebbe, monumental work on Tanya. And when you open that part of Tanya and you look for what are the explanations about this question, which the Rebbe calls a kusha yedua, and there's nothing from the previous Rebbeim. There's nothing from the previous Rebbeim. There's, like you said, there's tens from the Rebbe, and all that kind of Matzavayata, and then the Chiddush of Tashamim Hey, the Maimar Vayuchai Sarah. And you dig and you find the Rebbe himself in his letters quotes Rebbe Fala Khan's answer in Atomim, so you do the research and you pull that up. And you've mentioned to me in the past that there's from other Chassidim, Yisrael Shlomo Chaim and Graham, and you said they explain the same way. Matzavayata, basically. That the way. Oh,
no.
They say that they explain what?
The first answer of Falakhan.
Oh, that it's that. Oh, you mean the technical answer that he's not describing the Benoni, he's describing not the tzaddik?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, so let's leave that alone. Fine. It's a nice pshat. It's a nice pshat. It's very deichik. Why? Why is it very deichik? Because this is the defining moment of the Benoni, and you're right. You're telling me I'm not the tzaddik. So, okay. Yeah, fine. So whatever, we're playing like you say inside baseball. So
and also not v'li'aver.
Right. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So let's leave that alone. Whoever wants to look it up, But the point is, there's nothing from the earlier Rebbeim, and that struck me very odd. So it struck me not just odd, but disturbing, because I'm sure Chassidim had this question before, so did they just rely on their mashpiyim to discuss it? Which is, that's fine with me. That's fine with me. And again, we do have, let's say you said from Grainim, that's already from the Rebbe Shab, right? And so I'm sure there's much before that and not documented. What?
Himself was a Chassid Marash.
Yeah, I understand. I'm saying mashpia from the times in the generation of the Rebbe Shab. And I'm sure there's from before also, just not documented necessarily. Fine, no problem. So if the answer is that the local mashpia had to explain the Yafar Sichase Lefnei Gdilim Shabir, whatever, so then no problem. But it's still a little bit interesting to me that none of the previous Rebbeim discussed this. It's not like they don't have on Tanya. The way you're explaining it now, it makes actually a little bit more sense, which is that it wasn't, if you learn Tanya right, then you shouldn't, you can still talk about it, you can bring about it, the Mashpiyim will explain it, but it's not a kasha, so then the question is, so why by the times that the Rebbe did it become a kusha yedua? We started perverting Tanya, the whole thing?
No, but I'll tell you also, it's reverse engineering. In other words, am I arrogant enough to say that if not for what I saw, the way that I was explanation,
right,
I would have arrived at that. Because this is Lavdavka. In other words,
no
it's reverse engineering. After I saw the Rebbe's question,
sure,
the Rebbe's answer, and the same thing that bothered me, like the Rebbe's answer seems like a deichik.
Right.
I thought about it a lot. And then one day, like, as they say in Hebrew, the Simon, how do they say the token fella? I'm like, wow, what the Rebbe saying here is so deep, based on everything. So I worked backwards. They didn't have the Rebbe's answer, so I don't know if they were,
No, so what about the Rebbe? Okay. But okay, so to finish it off in a more practical, I mean, not to finish it off, but the next question is not to go back into history and analyze history, but what you're saying, I think, is actually monumental in teaching Tanya. So my question to you is, if someone was starting to learn Perikid Beis or teach Perikid Beis, how would you say it's absolutely crucial to introduce Perikid Beis? Not only to answer this question, and not only to like answer in a way that the person learning it might even know the question, and he's waiting to pounce with the question, and you're going to bavarn the question I shouldn't even ask in the first place. But how would you introduce Perikid Beis that the student or the teacher should have the correct Hanocha, which, as you're saying, is really the whole idea of Tanya, of Sefer Shel Beinonim. How would you frame it?
So. If you got through Perek Yud Aleph, then you shouldn't have a problem with Perek Yud Beis. Let me explain to you why. Because if you got through Perek Yud Aleph, and the fact that someone who does mitzvahs 99.9% of the time, and does an Avera 0. Once every 6 months does an Avera Kala, is called a Rasha, how did you explain that?
Stam Yidden.
Well, but once you understand, we're not talking about behavior. Because in behavior, such a person is befeder shatzadik.
Right.
Befeder shatzadik. And therefore, when you go out in the world and someone says, what do you mean I'm a Rasha? You say, what do you mean? Well, I always thought a Rasha is mostly Averis. I'm not mostly Averis. The answer to the person is, you're right. You're taka tzaddik. Mm-hmm. And that's true. In the scale, or the used by Chazal, and the Shem HaMushal, which is absolutely used by Chazal, they're at tzaddik. The Rebbe is introducing something deeper, which is tzaddik ben Rasha is talking about benefesh, and therefore the fact that a person doesn't have Avera once, what does that tell you? There's an imbalance in the nefesh. He called it a Rasha. Why? Because the definition of a Rasha is someone who there's that internal imbalance. So once if you're able to explain Perek Yud Aleph that it should make sense, then but you're ready on your way to Perek Yud Beis making sense. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking at tzaddik and Rasha and Beinoni behaviorally, then how did you explain? How did you teach Perek Yud Aleph?
You're still getting bothered by the question, like, so we're Rishayim.
But besides the fact, how did you teach Perek Yud Aleph? How's that shaykh? How's it shaykh to say that someone who, again, we're talking about a yid who is a shema tereh mitzvahs and everything, and once every 3 months or 6 months, he fails, he does a bittul tereh for 2 minutes, or says a shena lashon hara, right? That's a rasha.
Right.
How's that?
So you said before, the Bavchers are totally comfortable with that.
Yeah, but for the rest of them, yeah. That's different. That's a different.
Yeah. Right.
So we're basically saying if you were on the right path until you get it, once you get it, this is just the cherry on top of the icing.
And I think it ties back to what you're saying about the important maturity to learn Tanya. And I think also because now all of a sudden in a way the Avodah Tanya became more philosophical, because like you said clearly that Tanya is not a farbrengen in the sense of trying to encourage you to do Torah mitzvahs. It's not here to encourage you to keep Torah mitzvahs. That's what Shulchan Aruch is for. That's what Torah is for. To encourage you to do mitzvahs.
That's what Haggadah is for. It's inspiration. Tanya is about transformation in a very deep way. Right,
which starts off as a philosophy. And therefore, the ability to connect that to the relevant part takes maturity and takes the patience. And I think what you said also about seeing the bigger picture, where's Alter Rebbe heading with this whole discussion? And then we could appreciate what's... But at the same time, it's relevant because, like you're saying, not the Benoni moments, but the Benoni areas. To take that deep philosophy and to translate it into one area of your life and then another area of your life.
Anyways, for all those who are going to be listening to this podcast, the many, many, many tens of thousands of people. So I'm sure many of them are going to say, but there's the story about Ibn Nissen.
Yeah, with the...
There's a story about Ibn Nissen.
Yeah.
So first of all...
Say it.
They say that there was a kid that asked, well, maybe one of his Einiklach or someone asked Ibn Nissen that how's it shaykh to be a Beinoni? So Ibn Nissen said, can you be Beinoni for the next 2 minutes? He said, yeah. Eba say, okay, so 2 minutes after that, 2 minutes after that.
That's the Benoni moment smoker. That's, yeah.
So a few things. Number one. Oh, okay.
Exactly.
And if it is a true story, but I'm sorry, I learned Tanya, I understand, I'm sorry, that sounds a little, that's not what Tanya says. So the story it's not as if it's Rabbi Sein and the Sieno, and I think Tanya is very clearly, that's not what Tanya is, and that's not what the Beinoni is. That's number one. Number two, who said the story is true. Number three, even if it is true.
I like how that was number two.
What?
I like how that was number two.
No.
Not number one.
It is, because even if it is true, I'm not in this fault.
Yeah.
But number three is that he was speaking to a little kid.
Right.
That's a little kid. And maybe that's what the 10-year-old kid was able to make up.
Right. I think that's the most important answer of the three answers.
No, the first answer is the most important answer.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious.
Why?
Because if you learn Tanya, that's what it says. The fact that you hear a story, but this and it shouldn't change it. The other,
right.
So it shouldn't.
Right. You say that's what you tell to a little kid, and then you need to know what the other answer is. That's in the bigger picture of Tanya, how does this relate to the feelings that the Benoni goes through? In other words, how is that not like talking about identity? Isn't that, or in other words, once Alter Rebbe defines what the Benoni is, which you're saying is much more of an identity, then the way that Alter Rebbe goes into the feelings of the Benoni, isn't that more, so to speak, behavioral, so to speak, more self-help in the sense of trying to, and I don't think there's a problem if yes.
Which feelings are you talking about?
The chavs, chafei, chavav, and on.
That's troubleshooting. That's because in order to attain that status, there can be those negative emotions can be a problem for that. That's a topic for another day.
Yeah, that stuff is
Shmuel, people, they struggle. And they're like, what? I'm struggling. Are you going to help me? How are you going to help me? What Alter Rebbe is saying is, you can become a different person. And you could. It's very different than saying, I'm going to teach you how to white knuckle. You ever heard the expression white knuckle?
No.
It's in recovery. Willpower, Tanya is much more than that. Tanya is actually, you can become a person with the Aver. Can you imagine that? But again, don't imagine that in everything, because then then it becomes a little too much. You're biting off too much.
Right.
But imagine an area in which you struggle, and if you know that Tanya can help you become to a place of the Aver in that area, that's powerful stuff. That's not only that behavior control. We're talking about something much deeper, and that's where Derech Haruch and Derech Tzara comes in. Derech Haruch, Derech Tzara are transformational tools.
Nice.
L'chaim, hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we'll continue
there were way too many things there that we said this for another time. So, yeah.
So, chronicle them and take notes, and we'll do this another time.
Thank you very much.